The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the ears. A single road cut through the forest, and a young man walked along its edge with a small lantern in his hand. He wasn't searching for anything. He was only passing through, taking the long way home because he liked the stillness of the trees. The air smelled of pine, and the ground carried the softness of fallen leaves. Then he heard it. At first it was only a faint sound, almost like the cry of a bird. But the more he listened, the more it seemed different, broken, weak, almost human. He froze, holding his breath, unsure if he should move closer or turn back. Curiosity won. Carefully he pushed through the bushes, letting the lantern's glow guide him deeper into the trees. There, lying among the roots of an old oak, was something he never expected to see. She looked like a girl, young, fragile, her skin pale against the darkness. But the wings gave her away. They stretched out awkwardly behind her, one folded tightly, the other bent at a strange angle as if struck by something heavy. Feathers were scattered around her, some streaked with blood, others shining faintly under the lantern light. For a long moment, he did not move. His heart pounded in his chest, the kind of pounding that came when the world suddenly felt unreal. A winged being here on Earth? His first thought was fear. His second thought was wonder. But his third, the one that stayed, was concern. She was hurt. Badly hurt. He crouched beside her, trying to see if she was alive. Her breathing was shallow. Her lips pressed tight as if she was holding back pain. When the light touched her face, he saw the faint shimmer of tears on her cheeks. She wasn't just a strange creature from another place, she was suffering. He could have left. No one would have blamed him. A normal man would have walked away, convincing himself it was none of his business. But something inside him refused. He couldn't leave her broken on the ground. Not when she was fighting so hard just to breathe. Gently, he set down the lantern and reached toward her wing. She flinched at his touch, a small sound escaping her throat. Her eyes opened halfway, and for a moment he met her gaze. They were unlike any eyes he had ever seen, deep, glowing softly as if carrying the light of another sky. She whispered something, words he didn't understand, her voice trembling with fear. But he shook his head slowly, speaking softly in return. "I won't hurt you. You're safe." Of course, she couldn't know his language. But maybe the tone, the way he moved, the calmness in his voice. Maybe those things mattered more than words. She blinked at him, confused, but her body loosened slightly, as if some part of her believed. He studied the broken wing. The bone seemed delicate yet strong. The injury was clear. The joint had snapped, leaving the feathers misaligned and limp. He had fixed engines before, patched holes in machines, even mended broken tools. He knew this was nothing like those things, but his mind still worked the same way. Find the problem. Find the solution. Carefully, he straightened the wing, aligning the feathers as best as he could. She gasped in pain, her hands curling into fists, but she did not pull away. He worked with slow patience, using strips of cloth torn from his own shirt to bind the joint, creating a support to hold it steady. Each movement was gentle, each knot tied with care as if the wing was more precious than glass. When he was finished, he sat back, his hands trembling. She lay still, breathing heavier now, but her eyes stayed on him. Something had changed in that look. The fear was still there, but softer, mixed with a hint of wonder, almost as if she couldn't understand why he had bothered at all. The forest around them was silent again, but the silence felt different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with something unspoken. Trust, fragile and uncertain, but real enough to hold on to. He picked up the lantern, its glow wrapping them both in a circle of light. She watched him, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak again, but the words never came. Instead, she let her eyes close, her body sinking into rest at last, knowing she wasn't alone anymore. The man sat beside her, guarding the strange girl with broken wings. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or what her presence meant. All he knew was simple. She had needed help, and he had given it. And somehow in that moment he felt the choice would change everything. The night passed slowly, with the lantern burning low beside them. The man had not slept. His eyes kept drifting to the strange girl resting against the roots of the old oak. Her breathing had grown steadier after he bound her wing, but every now and then a quiet tremor shook her body, and he worried she might not last till morning. He had seen strange things in his life. Storms that tore through villages, machines that failed when most needed, and once, A meteor that split the sky into fire, but nothing compared to this. A girl with wings lying broken in his world, looking both otherworldly and painfully fragile. When the first light of dawn touched the forest, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, catching the sunlight in a way that made them glimmer like jewels. She blinked as if unsure if he was real or only part of some fading dream. He offered her a small smile, though his own exhaustion weighed heavily on him. She tried to sit up, and pain shot through her wing. She let out a sharp cry, her hand clutching at the binding he had made. Instinctively, he reached forward to steady her, murmuring soft words she could not understand. She froze at his touch, then slowly relaxed, her gaze searching his face. He could feel her studying him, as if she wanted to see the truth behind his actions. Her lips moved again, speaking words in a language he had never heard. The sounds were soft, musical, almost like wind brushing through leaves. He shook his head, helpless to answer. "I don't understand," he whispered, his voice quiet but calm. For a moment, frustration crossed her features, but then she did something he did not expect. She lifted her hand, weak and trembling, and placed it against his chest, right where his heartbeat pulsed. Her touch was light, almost hesitant, but her meaning was clear. She wanted to feel who he was, not just hear the sounds he made. The man let her hand rest there. His heartbeat was strong, steady despite his tiredness. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if the rhythm itself gave her comfort. When she opened them again, she looked at him differently. Not as a stranger, not even as a threat, but as someone who had chosen not to walk away. He rose and walked to a nearby stream, filling a small flask he carried. Returning, he offered the water to her. She hesitated, her pride and caution fighting against her need. At last she accepted, drinking slowly, her throat moving with each swallow. When she handed it back, her eyes held something close to gratitude. The man studied her carefully in the daylight. Her wings, even injured, were magnificent. Each feather shimmered faintly when the sun touched it, like silver brushed with shadow. Her clothes were torn, strange in design and unlike anything from his world. Clearly, she had not fallen from any place he knew. She was something else, something far beyond his understanding. Yet here she was, in need of help, and he was the only one beside her. She tried again to speak, pointing at her wing, then at him. The words carried frustration, maybe even fear, but he guessed she was asking why. Why had he done this? Why had he helped her at all? He could not explain with words. Instead, he simply shrugged, pointing at her, then at himself, then pressing his hand to his chest. His message was clumsy but clear enough. "Because you needed me and I could not leave." She stared at him for a long time, her eyes shining with something that looked close to disbelief. Perhaps in her world, kindness from a stranger was rare. Perhaps no one had ever dared to care for her without demand or fear. The forest around them grew warmer with the rising sun. Birds began to sing again, and the air smelled fresh after the long night. For a moment, the world seemed almost peaceful, as if it had paused to watch the fragile bond forming between two beings who could not speak the same words, yet somehow understood each other. But deep down, the man knew this peace would not last. She had not simply fallen here by accident. Somewhere out there, someone would be looking for her, and if they came, what would they see when they found a human beside her? Still, he refused to think too far ahead. All he knew was that she was alive, and her wing had a chance to heal because of him. That was enough for now. As the day stretched on, she grew stronger, able to sit upright though her movements were stiff. She kept glancing at him as if trying to measure the distance between them. Not the space of the forest floor, but the space of trust. Each time he offered food, water, or even silence, that distance seemed to shrink a little. By evening, when the sun painted the sky in red and gold, she surprised him again. She spoke one word, slow, careful, almost broken, but it was in his language. His eyes widened. She repeated it clearer this time. "Safe." He nodded quickly, his throat tight with emotion, and whispered back, "Safe." For the first time she smiled, a small, fragile curve of her lips that carried more meaning than all the words they had tried before. And in that moment, the man realized something. Whatever world she could me from whatever fate had led her here, his choice to help her had already tied their paths together. Neither of them could return to the lives they had known before. Something larger had begun, though neither could yet see where it would lead. The days that followed were slow but filled with small changes. The man had built a shelter close to the forest clearing, a simple place made of wood and canvas where the winged girl could rest without fear of rain or cold. She spent most of her time lying still, her broken wing carefully bound, but each day he saw strength returning to her. Her eyes stayed alert now, following his movements with curiosity rather than fear. He had expected silence between them, yet slowly, sounds began to bridge the gap. She repeated words after him, testing them on her tongue as if shaping new sounds was both strange and exciting. At first they were only simple ones: water, food, safe. But her determination was strong, and she practiced whenever she could. Sometimes she laughed quietly at her own mistakes, a soft sound that surprised him with its warmth. The man taught patiently, pointing at objects, then speaking their names. She listened, tilting her head like a bird studying something new, then echoed him. It was not perfect, but each attempt brought them closer. For him, it was strange to think he was teaching language to someone who looked as if she had stepped from another world. For her, every word was a bridge, proof that he wanted her to be understood, not silenced. At night, when the fire burned low, she would sometimes speak in her own language, her voice quiet and thoughtful. He could not understand the words, but he listened, sensing that she was telling him pieces of herself, memories perhaps, or stories of skies he had never seen. She would gesture with her hands, her eyes turning distant, and though the meaning escaped him, he felt her loneliness in every tone. One evening, as the stars spread across the sky, she looked at him and asked softly, "Why help?" The words were clumsy, broken, but clear enough. He paused, staring at the fire. How could he explain something so simple and yet so hard to put into words? At last he answered quietly, "Because you were hurt. Because leaving you would have been wrong." She studied him for a long time, her gaze sharp as if searching for any sign of a hidden motive. When she found none, her expression softened. For the first time, she did not look like a stranger from another world. She looked like someone who wanted to believe in kindness. The man noticed something else as the days passed. Her wing was healing faster than he had expected. The bone seemed stronger each morning, the feathers already beginning to grow back in neat rows. Perhaps her kind healed differently, or perhaps it was only his imagination. Whatever the reason, the sight filled him with a strange mix of relief and worry. Relief that she would survive. Worry that once she could fly again, she might leave and he would never see her again. But there was little time to dwell on that. Strange signs began to appear in the forest. On the third night, he heard a deep hum in the distance, a sound that did not belong to any creature he knew. On the fourth day, he found scorch marks on the ground a few miles away, as if fire had touched the earth from above. The girl noticed too. Each time the sound echoed through the trees, her eyes widened, and her hand clutched at his arm. She was afraid. Not of him. Not of being on Earth, but of being found. He began to understand. She had not simply fallen here, she had escaped. Whoever was searching for her was not coming to rescue, but to claim. The thought sent a chill down his spine. What would they do if they found her with him? That night she whispered something in her own tongue, her voice breaking with urgency. She pointed to the sky, then shook her head. He could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning well enough. She did not want to go back. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Then you won't," he said, though she could not catch every word. Still, the tone was clear. His promise was simple. He would not let anyone take her away. The next morning, she did something unexpected. She touched her wing gently, then looked at him with determination. In halting words, she said, "You care, my people." "No." Her voice cracked, but she pushed on, repeating until the meaning was unmistakable. Her own kind had not given her the kindness he had. She wanted him to understand that. His chest tightened at the weight of her words. Whatever world she came from, whatever empire or kingdom ruled her skies, it had not treated her the way he did in one single night beneath the trees. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It was growing roots. She trusted him not just with her wing, not just with her safety, but with her very being. But trust was a dangerous thing. Far away beyond the forest, the sound of machines in the sky grew louder with each passing night. The man knew it was only a matter of time before those who searched would arrive at his doorstep. And when they did, he would have to make a choice, not just for himself, but for her. For now, though, he let her rest by the fire, her broken wings slowly mending, her voice whispering clumsy words of his language, and in the quiet moments between fear and hope, He realized that something inside him had already changed. She was no longer just a stranger who had fallen from the sky. She was someone he could not imagine letting go. The peace of the forest did not last. It began with a low hum, a vibration that shook the leaves before the sound reached the ears. The man and the winged girl froze at the same time, their eyes lifting to the sky. A shadow stretched across the treetops, long and heavy, blotting out the sunlight. Birds scattered in panic, their wings cutting through the air with sharp cries. The girl's face turned pale. She whispered something in her own language, her hands clutching at her bound wing. The man didn't need to understand her words. He saw the fear in her eyes, and it told him everything. Whoever was coming was not a friend. The hum grew louder until the very ground seemed to tremble. Then the trees parted under a wash of light as a massive vessel descended, its surface gleaming like dark metal polished by ages. It landed in the clearing beyond the stream, crushing earth and stone under its weight. From the ship's side, a ramp extended and figures appeared. They were tall, armored in silver that glinted like frozen stars. Their movements were precise, too disciplined to belong to hunters or wanderers. Soldiers. Their eyes swept the forest, cold and sharp, and when they spotted the girl, they moved with purpose. The man's first instinct was to step in front of her. He had no weapons, nothing but his body and his will, but he stood firm. The soldiers stopped a few paces away. One raised a hand, palm open, and spoke in a commanding tone. The words were foreign, but the gesture was clear: stand aside. The man shook his head. His heart hammered, but he did not move. The girl's voice broke the tense silence. She spoke rapidly, her tone filled with both anger and fear. The soldiers hesitated, exchanging glances, then lowered their weapons slightly. One of them pressed a device on his wrist, and a different voice, smoother and translated, filled the air. She is the daughter of the Empress. She must return. The man turned sharply toward the girl. Daughter of an Empress? The truth hit him like a stone. She was not only a stranger from another world, she was royalty. The weight of it pressed against his chest, but before he could speak, the translated voice continued. You have touched her. You have bound her wing. By decree, the Empress demands your presence as well. The man blinked in disbelief. His presence? Why would an empire, distant and unknown, care for someone like him? He looked at the girl, searching her face for an answer. She looked away, guilt flickering in her eyes. The soldiers did not wait for agreement. They stepped aside, forming a path toward the ramp of the vessel. One motioned with a hand, sharp and impatient. The girl reached for his arm, her grip trembling as if silently begging him not to resist. The man hesitated. Every part of him wanted to pull her into the forest, to run until the world itself gave no trace of them. But he knew the truth. There was no running from ships that crossed the skies. If he resisted, they would both be taken anyway. At least this way, he might keep her safe. Slowly, he nodded. The soldiers moved forward, one of them carefully lifting the girl into his arms, though she cried out in protest. The man followed, his fists clenched, his steps heavy with doubt. The ramp closed behind them with a hiss, and the forest was swallowed in silence once more. Inside the vessel, the air was cool and sharp, filled with a faint hum of unseen engines. Strange symbols glowed across the walls, and the corridors stretched like veins of light and metal. The soldiers led them deeper, until at last they entered a chamber so vast it seemed to hold the weight of a mountain. At the far end sat a figure on a throne carved from crystal and shadow. She was tall, her wings vast and unbroken, her presence filling the space like the air itself belonged to her. Her eyes were the same as the girl's, only sharper, older, filled with centuries of command. The Empress, the girl cried out softly, her voice cracking with emotion. The Empress raised a hand, silencing her without a word. Her gaze turned to the man. She studied him as one might study a puzzle, curious, cautious, but undeniably intrigued. The soldiers spoke again, explaining in their language, then switched to the smooth translation. He repaired her wing. He did not harm her. He stands here by her side of his own will. The Empress leaned forward slightly. For a long, heavy moment no one spoke. Then her voice filled the hall, deep and commanding. You touched what none of your kind were meant to touch. And yet, she lives. She trusts you. The man could not understand every word, but the tone reached him. He stood tall despite the weight of her gaze, refusing to bow. He had helped her not for reward, not for fear, but because it was right. That was the only truth he could offer. The Empress's eyes narrowed, then softened just enough to show a trace of something unusual. Respect. She rose, her wings unfolding with power that shook the chamber. "By my word," the translation declared, "you are summoned not as prisoner, but as family." The hall erupted in whispers, the soldiers shifting in disbelief. The man's heart pounded. Family. He could barely grasp the meaning, yet one thing was clear. The Empress had seen in him something she valued. The girl's eyes filled with relief, her lips trembling with a fragile smile. For her, the choice meant safety. For him, it meant stepping into a world far greater than he had ever known. And as the throne room quieted again, the man realized his life would never belong only to himself. It had already been tied to hers, and now, to an empire that demanded more than he could yet imagine. The throne hall was still filled with whispers. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their armor clinking in the silence that followed the Empress's command. To them, the idea was unthinkable. A human, an outsider, declared family by the highest ruler of their kind. But no one dared to speak against her openly. The weight of her authority was too heavy, and her word was law. The man stood in the middle of the vast chamber, his posture stiff, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. He had only wanted to help a wounded stranger. He had not asked for reward nor recognition, and now he found himself bound to something far greater than he could grasp. The Empress's gaze did not leave him. It was like standing before a storm, terrifying yet strangely calm in its center. Beside him, the winged girl clutched his arm tightly. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear this time, but with something like relief. She whispered his name, or what little of it she could pronounce, in her soft voice, as if to anchor him in this place where everything felt unreal. The Empress finally spoke again. Her voice echoed across the hall, firm and unyielding. The translation followed a breath later. "You will remain by her side. You have touched her wing and healed what even my healers could not. This bond cannot be undone. In my house you are bound." The man did not bow. He had never learned such gestures, nor did he believe in bending before someone simply because of rank. Instead, he met her gaze with steady eyes. Perhaps it was foolish, perhaps dangerous, but it was the only way he knew how to stand. Something flickered in the Empress's expression, amusement, maybe even respect, but not all shared her view. From the side of the hall, an elder figure stepped forward, robes trailing like shadows across the floor. His wings were folded, but his voice carried power. He bowed to the Empress, then spoke quickly in their language. The translation soon followed. "Great Empress, it is dangerous. He is not one of us. To bring him into the family is to invite weakness. He should be removed before he taints her further." The hall grew colder. Soldiers stiffened, waiting for the Empress's answer. The man felt the girl's grip on his arm tighten until her knuckles turned pale. She looked terrified, not for herself but for him. The Empress lifted her hand, and the hall fell silent. Her wings shifted slightly, a ripple of authority spreading with the motion. When she spoke, her tone cut like steel. "You speak of weakness. Yet this human did what you and your kind did not. He chose compassion when he had no gain. He acted with courage when he had no power. Tell me, what weakness lies in such choice?" The elder lowered his gaze, silent. None dared to argue further. The Empress's word ended all debate. Still, the man felt the weight of many eyes on him. He could sense their doubt, their mistrust. He did not belong here, not in their glittering halls of crystal and light. And yet, strangely, he did not feel small. He had faced storms before, faced hunger, faced nights alone in the forest. This was only another storm, and he would endure it too. After the hall was dismissed, the Empress commanded that the man and the girl be taken to private chambers. The corridors were quiet as the soldiers led them away, their footsteps echoing on the polished stone. The man kept his head high, though inside he wrestled with questions. Why had she spared him? Why had she gone further, making him something as bold as family? In the chambers, the girl finally let go of his arm. She turned to him, her face filled with emotion she could not easily put into words. In broken pieces of his language, she tried, "Mother, trust you." Change her mind? He frowned, confused. She struggled again, pressing her hand to her chest. "You fix wing, but not only wing, you fix heart." Her words struck deeper than she could have known. He sat beside her, silent for a moment, his thoughts heavy. He had never thought of himself as someone important. He was only a man who fixed broken things, machines, tools, whatever needed mending. Yet somehow, by mending her wing, he had touched something far beyond himself. That night, As they sat by the faint glow of the chamber's lamps, the man realized the truth. He was no longer free to walk away. The Empress had tied him to her daughter, to her empire, to a destiny he had not chosen. But deep inside, he also realized something else. If leaving meant breaking the fragile trust in the girl's eyes, he would never choose to leave. The palace was vast, and beyond its walls stretched an empire he could not imagine. Whispers would spread, doubt would grow, and eyes would follow him wherever he walked. But he did not fear it. He had faced far worse alone in his world. Now he was not alone. In the quiet of that chamber, the winged girl leaned lightly against him, her head resting just above his shoulder. Her broken wing twitched, but it no longer seemed as fragile as before. She closed her eyes, trusting him completely. The man looked out at the alien sky beyond the window, filled with stars brighter than any he had ever seen. His life had changed forever, pulled into a path he could never have chosen, yet he felt no regret. Whatever storm awaited him in this new world, he would face it. For her. The days that followed were strange and heavy with tension. The man had been given quarters near the Empress's daughter, chambers filled with soft light and walls carved from shining stone. Servants came and went, bowing with stiff movements, but their eyes told another story. They looked at him with suspicion, as if every breath he took was a crime against their order. Word spread quickly through the palace. A human brought before the Empress declared family. To many it was more than shocking, it was an insult. He could feel it in the way guards lingered too long at doors, in the silence that fell when he entered a hall. The empire was not used to outsiders being lifted so high, and their unease turned to anger. But the Empress's daughter did not waver. She stayed close to him, her broken wing still mending but her spirit stronger than ever. She practiced his language each day, repeating words until they became smoother, her eyes shining with determination. Sometimes she would laugh when she made mistakes, and in those small moments the palace felt less like a cage. One evening she pointed to him and said in careful words, "They hate you." Her voice was soft but steady. He nodded slowly. "I know," she hesitated, then added, "but I do not." Those words carried more weight than any title the Empress had given him. He smiled faintly, and she smiled back, the bond between them growing stronger with every passing day. Yet beyond the chambers, unrest grew. In the council hall, elders and generals whispered among themselves. They spoke of danger, of weakness, of tradition broken by the Empress's choice. Some wanted the man removed quietly. Others called for open defiance. But none dared confront the Empress directly. Not yet. The storm broke during a gathering in the Great Hall. The Empress sat upon her throne, her daughter at her side, the man standing not far behind. Around them, nobles and commanders filled the chamber, their wings folded but their eyes sharp with discontent. An elder stepped forward, the same one who had spoken against the human before. His voice rang through the hall, filled with barely concealed anger. "Great Empress, we honor you, but this cannot stand. To bring a human into our blood is to lower what we are." The people whisper. The soldiers question. Your empire shakes. The hall filled with murmurs, voices rising like a storm tide. The man felt the weight of 100 eyes pressing against him, each one filled with doubt or disdain. For a moment, he wondered if the Empress would change her mind under such pressure, but she did not. She rose slowly from her throne, her wings unfolding with such power that the hall fell silent at once. Her gaze swept across her court, cold and commanding. "You call him weakness," she said, her voice carrying like thunder. The translator repeated her words in smooth tones. "Yet in his weakness lies strength you do not understand. While you boast of blood and power, he acted with neither. He chose compassion where you would have chosen pride. Tell me, which of you can claim?" "The same?" No one spoke. The hall was silent but tense, anger still simmering under the surface. The Empress turned her gaze toward the man. "He repaired what you could not. He earned trust where you sowed fear, and for this I claim him as family. Let those who doubt remember my word is law." The court bowed, but it was not obedience born of respect, it was fear. Their resentment had not vanished. It had only been silenced, waiting for a moment to return. After the gathering, as the man walked with the Empress's daughter back to their chambers, he felt the weight of unseen eyes watching them from every corner. Whispers followed like shadows. He knew the Empress's declaration had not ended the danger. It had only deepened it. That night he sat by the window, staring at the alien sky filled with stars. The girl sat beside him, her wing folded carefully, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. She seemed calmer, as if her mother's words had given her hope. But he could not shake the feeling that the worst was still to come. "Why do they hate?" she asked quietly, her voice uncertain in his language. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because they fear what they don't understand." She nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Then she whispered, "I understand you." The simple words filled him with warmth, but they also sharpened his resolve. The Empire might reject him, might despise his presence, but he would not walk away. She trusted him, and that trust mattered more than all the whispers in the halls. Far below, in the darker parts of the palace, groups of nobles and commanders gathered in secret. They whispered plans, their voices sharp with bitterness. If the Empress would not listen to reason, they would act in other ways. The man did not know of these plots yet. All he knew was the fragile peace of the moment, the girl's quiet trust and the promise he had made long ago in the forest, to protect her, no matter what came. But deep inside, he sensed the storm building. And this time it would not be a storm of ships in the sky. It would come from within the very heart of the Empire itself. The night in the palace was quiet on the surface, but underneath, shadows moved with purpose. The nobles and commanders who had whispered for days finally stepped from secrecy into action. They believed the Empress had grown blind, too charmed by her daughter's rescuer to see the danger of raising a human above them. And so they planned to end it themselves. The man awoke in the middle of the night to a sound, faint but sharp. The scrape of metal. He sat upright, eyes narrowing, every instinct telling him something was wrong. The chamber was dim, the alien sky beyond the window glowing faintly, but the stillness was broken by movement at the door. Before he could react, the door burst open. Figures in armor rushed inside, blades gleaming faintly in the low light. They moved fast, their wings folding tight behind them as they advanced. The girl cried out, fear filling her voice. She reached for him instinctively, and he stepped in front of her without hesitation. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his hands and his will. But he had faced storms before, and he would face this one too. The first attacker lunged. The man grabbed a chair and swung it hard, the wood splintering against armor, but enough to knock the soldier off balance. Another came from the side, and he ducked low, pushing forward with all his strength to slam the figure against the wall. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he didn't stop. The girl shouted something in her language, her voice echoing like a plea. She grabbed a lamp from the table and hurled it across the room, flames bursting as it shattered. The sudden light startled their attackers, giving the man a chance to grab one of the fallen blades. Now armed, he stood tall, breathing hard, the firelight flickering across his face. His hands shook not with fear but with fury. "You won't touch her," he growled. The fight spread into the corridor as guards finally arrived, their loyalty to the Empress bringing them into the clash. Steel rang against steel, wings beat the air as the palace shook with chaos. The man kept close to the girl, shielding her with his body, striking when he had to, holding ground when the wave of soldiers threatened to push them apart. Then, above the chaos, a voice thundered, "Enough!" The Empress strode into the corridor, her wings unfurled in all their glory, her eyes blazing. The very air seemed to tremble at her presence. With a single gesture, her guards pushed back the rebels, forcing them to their knees. The corridor fell silent except for the crackle of the broken lamp still burning on the floor. The man stood, breathing heavily, his grip still tight on the stolen blade. The girl clung to his arm, her face pale but her eyes fierce. The Empress's gaze swept over the traitors. "You dare raise arms in my house? Against my word?" One of the nobles, blood on his lip, lifted his head with defiance. "We dare because you have lost your way. A human has no place in our blood. If you will not protect our empire's honor, we will." The Empress's wings snapped open wider, the sound like thunder. "You speak of honor, yet you crawl through shadows with daggers in the night. This human showed more honor in one act of compassion than you have in a lifetime of power." Her voice was so sharp, so certain that even the rebels faltered. She turned to her guards. "Remove them. Their voices no longer belong in my court." The traitors were dragged away, their protests fading into the distance. Silence returned, broken only by the girl's shaky breath. The Empress stepped closer to the man, She studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, the stolen blade still trembling in his grip. Then slowly, she placed her hand over his and pushed the weapon down. "You did not choose this," she said softly, almost to herself, "but you have proven again that choice or not, you will stand. Not for power, not for reward, but for her." The man said nothing. He only looked at the girl who still held tightly to him, her broken wing brushing against his side. The Empress's expression softened. "Then so it will be. My people may whisper, but whispers fade. Deeds remain." Later that night, when peace returned to the palace, the man and the girl sat together near the high balcony. The stars stretched endlessly above them, silent witnesses to all that had happened. The girl leaned against him, her words broken but clear. "You fight. For me." He looked down at her, his voice low. "Always." She smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, it was a smile free of fear, free of doubt. It was trust made whole. The man knew life would not grow easier. The court would not forget, the nobles would not forgive, and danger would linger in every shadow. But he also knew something stronger. He was no longer alone. He had a place, not because of the Empress's command, but because of the bond he had chosen. A bond that no blade, no whisper, no storm could break. And as the alien night stretched onward, the man sat with the girl by his side, ready to face whatever the Empire would throw at them next. For family was no longer about blood, it was about choice, and he had chosen.